Welcome back, and you're still watching Your Story. Now, today is the International Day for the Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its abolition, which was first celebrated in a number of countries, in particular in Haiti in 1998 and Goree in Senegal the following year. Now, while slavery has long been abolished, modern forms still exist, with women and children being primary victims and most often enslaved in a form of bonded labor, domestic servitude, sexual exploitation, and even forced marriage. To talk to us about this scourge and how rife it is in South Africa, in the region, human trafficking in particular, is Tabitha Lage from the Hope Risen Foundation. Tabitha, thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Peter, thank you very much for having me in the studio, and it's a privilege to be here because this is something very close to my heart and something I am extremely passionate about.
Well, let's talk about it. You know, when we say International Day of Slavery and it's being abolished, most people have these images of the TV series Roots and people in chains being shipped off to America. But in the modern day, slavery does persist, but it takes different forms. Tell us a little bit about the forms that you've been seeing, particularly here in South Africa.
So today, human trafficking, or slavery as we're putting it, is still going on. And this is why we're calling it modern day slavery. It is still happening, and it is happening in our country. It is real. And the forms of trafficking that we are experiencing, and I'm speaking from 10 years of experience in the field of anti-human trafficking, I can tell you that we are seeing child trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, forced marriages, which are becoming a form of trafficking, organ trafficking. And so these are the situations that we are facing.
How does it happen? Typically, what's kind of the process?
Well, it's a process that is not a comfortable process, and it's not a good process, let's put it that way. It's part of a bigger picture, which is organized crime. It can involve very often where it starts off as kidnapping, which can lead to trafficking, but not always. Trafficking can also happen, simply put, through social media, where a young girl is lured into the promised land of a great job because she met somebody on social media.
And then what happens to them?
Well, often it depends on what the trafficker is looking for. So if we're talking about sex trafficking, very often these young girls and these women are sold into brothels and sex clubs.
How is it that they are enslaved? I mean, can't you just leave?
No, you can't. And that's such a good question, Peter, to ask, because very often we do say, well, why didn't you just run away or just leave? But they are held against their will more than we actually think. And there's also these forms of debt bondage and the addiction of drugs. These young girls and women are forced to take drugs, and it is part of the process in order to keep them where they are so they don't run away.
Who are you seeing as the most vulnerable? And as parents, how do we protect these young girls in particular?
Young children and the youth of today are very vulnerable, as well as the more poorer communities, very, very vulnerable. However, I will say to you, Peter, that this can happen to anybody out there, including you and I. There is no one specific race, there's no one specific age. It's not just females. Males are also being trafficked. So it can happen to any one of us.
Tabitha, it's 2018. We live in a modern world. How is it happening in South Africa?
Well, the thing is that we need to start looking at what needs to change. And before I comment around what needs to change, I first just do want to commend that there are really great people in government who are doing a phenomenal job in helping us to fight this. But we need to implement more resources. We need more funding. We need more manpower to be able to take down what we're dealing with.
So what are you trying to do? As I know there's quite a big network of several NGOs. What are you trying to do? How do you help?
So we are an NGO, part of civil society, where we create a lot of awareness, empowering parents and empowering the children and the youth around what human trafficking is. As well as that, we have various programs where we work with survivors as well. And it goes furthermore and beyond that. But please do take a look at our website.
So, you know, often a lot of these things happen under our noses, next door and things like that. What sort of things should we look out for that raise suspicion that maybe we can phone a hotline and say, look, there's something that doesn't look quite right next door?
It's such a good point to mention, because we as South Africans are quite naive to human trafficking in South Africa. It is still very new to us, but it's a real thing that's happening daily. And we're kind of waiting for the big next Taken movie to happen. And it's not like that. And so trafficking can happen from one street to the next, from one country to the next. It doesn't have to be the Taken movie episode. And so what we can do is we can be alert to the surroundings. You know, are we engaging in conversation with people? Does a woman look really like she's very nervous? She doesn't look well. Perhaps she's with a much older person, and the language barrier. You know, there's loads of these red flags that we can actually equip ourselves around to help us save a life.
And I suppose that there's some people who, you know, use the services of sex workers, and perhaps not knowing that that person actually is enslaved. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I have to tell you that I don't think in all my years of being on the ground that I've ever come across a woman who's wanted to really and truly be there.
All right, okay. We've run out of time, but give us a sense of numbers. Do we have any idea how many people are being trafficked in one form or another?
Unfortunately, we don't have a national database to be able to quote those stats. We've got individual departments, for example, law enforcement, advocates, and then we've got the national resource line. So what I can do is I can quote on that. The national resource line, which is the emergency hotline number, which you can contact if there is a problem or you suspect trafficking. They have received over 9,000 calls to date. And of those 9,000 calls, 1,000 of them were suspected trafficking cases or trafficking cases. Wow. That's enough to tell us that this is real.
All right, and what's that number?
0800 222 777.
Say it again.
0800 222 777.
Okay, all right. So please, let's be aware. Thanks very much indeed, Tabitha, for joining us, and again highlighting a very important issue that we should pay more attention to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
All right. That's where we're going to leave this conversation, but one that we should be mindful of, not just today as we look at this commemorative day, but rather every single day. It's happening around us.